You need to have a second-year wide receiver in your team, whether it's Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, or someone else. That's the advice we'll give you as we break down second-year wide receivers and tight ends, only on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome to Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. I'm Vinnie Iyer, and when I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com.
I'm Michelle Madgziuk. I'm a researcher for NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
Yeah, and together we have some good insights for you today on second-year wide receivers and tight ends. And I've been excited for this conversation, Michelle, because I don't think there's a second-year wide receiver that isn't getting hyped here. So let me break down the guys that are being drafted now as starters. Let's dive right into it. We do have Garrett Wilson. He's moved up all the way to 10 with the Jets. Chris Olave, his Ohio State teammate, has moved up to 12. So this is their ranking half-point PPR, according to the experts at Fantasy Pros right now. We have Drake London of the Falcons coming in at 24. Right behind him, Christian Watson of the Packers at 25. And Michelle's going to be happy about this. Jahan Dotson right there in wide receiver 3 range at 35. So, Michelle, I'll let you go at it. These five, it seems like you want to target at least one of these guys on your team, don't you? And do you kind of agree with this pecking order?
Yeah, I do overall. I think besides one player we'll get to a little bit later. I think he's going way too high. But just a few years ago, I feel like it was just a handful of years ago, it was like, okay, wide receivers break out in their third year. But I think that's completely changed now with rookies getting way more involved and seeing a higher target share and getting more experience. Their breakout year is really that second season now. We see it over and over and over again with these guys just blowing up in their second year. So I think when you're looking at the super high price of Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave, it seems fair because they have the opportunity to break out as a top wide receiver in the league. I think we should start here with Garrett Wilson, right? He has the highest ADP out of the bunch. Not only is he wide receiver 10, he's going 21st overall. So you're deciding to spend a second round pick on Garrett Wilson, which is risky, right? He had a very solid rookie season with 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns. It wasn't amazing for fantasy, though, but he had the worst quarterbacks of all time. So I just, now that he has Aaron Rodgers, you expect that he's going to get more accurate targets. And I just want to read out a stat real quick. So Garrett Wilson had 8 games with 5+ catchable targets last season. Just 8 games with 5+ catchable targets. In those games, he averaged 99 receiving yards per game. He had all 4 of his receiving touchdowns on the season in those games. And he averaged 20 fantasy points per game in PPR over those 8 games. So just give him 5 catchable targets and he's going to be great. In games with 6 catchable targets, he averaged 23 fantasy points per game. This guy is so talented. He just needs a good quarterback.
Yeah, and he's not only getting a good quarterback, Michelle. You said they had the worst quarterback play of all time. He's getting a 4-time MVP coming in, and Aaron Rodgers. We know there's not a lot else here either. That's the key thing with Garrett Wilson is like Corey Davis going to be in the mix and do anything that we believe in. Allen Lazard is there, sure, but Allen Lazard is just a guy, and his value has been tied a lot to his scoring. So that's pretty much it there. I guess you could get some from the tight ends with Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzomah there, but really Garrett Wilson is the number one defined like that. Everyone's just saying, okay, he's going to be the new Devontae Adams. Rodgers is going to target him all over the field. That's good for him, but I'm just a little concerned again. The volume of the Jets passing game may not be what everyone expects here. I get it that you have Rodgers, but this is a good defensive team, right? And they have a good offensive line with Laken Tomlinson and some other guys. They can run the ball. They might be playing some low-scoring games where they're grinding things out. So I'm not saying that's a way to go away from Garrett Wilson. I still like him in the top 12, but I actually might like Chris Olave a little bit more here, his teammate from Ohio State. And here's why. I do like, again, Derek Carr, another guy that loves to throw to one quarterback, kind of an interesting parallel. You had Carr with Adams, you had Rodgers with Adams. Now they're with different guys now as their go-to guys. So look at Derek Carr. There's not a lot there. There's Michael Thomas perpetually injured. Rashid Shaheed a little bit banged up here right now. Juwan Johnson, we'll see how that plays out. But we know Derek Carr falls in love with one receiver. We've seen it back in the day with Amari Cooper. Then he kind of worked in Michael Crabtree in the mix, but then he had Darren Waller. Then he had Devontae Adams. So he likes to target one guy quite a bit. And the Saints defense has lost a lot. I don't think they're going to be as good. You're going to see the ball be put up a little bit more. We know about the whole air yards thing. Derek Carr is pretty good at delivering those air yards to Chris Olave and maybe making the connections. And look, his quarterback situation wasn't great last year either. So keep that in mind. I mean, Derek Carr, he's not maybe Rodgers level, but he's going to put the ball in the hands of a guy like that. So I just like Olave's volume. He also has a nice schedule here when you look at the division. And the two Souths, right? He's going to get those here out of the NFC South. So I do like Olave a little bit more than Wilson because I just feel like the volume is going to be higher, and I think it's going to add up to the points that you're looking for. So it's pretty close. I do want to target both of these guys in my fantasy football drafts. However, if I take a running back first, I'm going to go after one of these guys in the next round.
So I disagree with you with the quarterback situation.
Yeah.
I think Andy Dalton and Derek Carr are the same exact guy. Derek Carr's just apparently been better at marketing himself. He does have more splashy type of games, I guess, but also some worse games than Andy Dalton has ever had. So I think they're exact same quarterback, but they just paid a ton of money to get the same exact production as they got from Andy Dalton. But I think Chris Olave was fine with Andy Dalton last year as a rookie. He did just score, he was wide receiver 26 in fantasy points per game. He had 119 targets last year, so that could increase, but I also don't know if it will because he was playing with like no other pass catchers last year, really. Are you scared at all about Michael Thomas coming in and stealing a good chunk of those targets?
I need to see Michael Thomas stay healthy. And you make a really good point about Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston. I did a tweet here when it was called Twitter back in the offseason to say, look, the numbers combined of Dalton and Winston were pretty much what Derek Carr put up with the Raiders last year. Now, does this different style of offense help Derek Carr? Is that going to be important here? Did he not figure out Josh McDaniels? And that was part of it. But yeah, it does concern me that Michael Thomas is there a little bit, but again, have we trusted Michael Thomas? He was off to a good start last year. Oh, Michael Thomas is back, and then he wasn't. So I just don't trust this guy to stay healthy at all. And I think the Saints realize that, right? Chris Olave is the clear number one here. Again, I look at Derek Carr. He's sometimes been able to support two receivers, but he tends to gravitate toward one, where I think Aaron Rodgers might be a little bit more adept to spread the ball around. I'm not saying that will change maybe that Wilson doesn't end up with more targets. I think you also might get big plays out of Chris Olave. So maybe a few more long scores or yardage spikes that way, and then a few more touchdowns. So really that's what it's going to come down to, right? A few big plays and a few touchdowns. That's all that's going to separate these two guys.
Yeah, I prefer Garrett Wilson over Chris Olave, but again, Garrett Wilson's going a whole round basically ahead of Olave, so you get that round discount. So if you don't feel comfortable taking Wilson, I want one of these two guys on my team. I think they're both going to have good seasons, and one of them is going to completely break out. It just they both are talented enough. It's just if their offenses can get it done for them.
Yeah, and based on their ADP and ranking, there's probably not a good chance that you're going to end up with both these guys on your team anyway. So
that'd be a little risky going with both.
Yeah, you can try to get both. I would like to see everyone try. It'll be a good thing to do here. Now we might not be as hot on this next group, well, especially the first guy, Michelle. I'm going to start with that. Drake London, they're at 24. I just don't love Drake London as much as some others do here. I see Kyle Pitts. He's a key target. This is a key part of this offense, and it's a low volume passing game, right? So how much are we going to get thrown to Drake London here if they're already incorporating a healthy Pitts into this mix? So I'm not sure. I think you were basing it on Drake London's big. He's got a catch radius, and there's two guys that are big that are going to catch the ball here, but I'm not exactly sure what he's going to get. I mean, if Pitts wasn't there, I'd feel a little bit better about Drake London, but I think to me, for the Desmond Ridder purposes, I think Pitts is a better target for him, right? I mean, if they're going to be run-heavy offense, throw the short, intermediate passes, I think it's going to come down Drake London is going to be a little touchdown dependent, and that scares me a little bit versus those other guys.
I'm actually comfortable with where Drake London is. I don't think it's the best value, but I think it's
Yeah.
a fair value. So he's going in the 6th round right now. He saw 29% of the Falcons' targets last year. That was 3rd most in the NFL, behind only Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. And it was the highest percent of team targets by a rookie since at least 2009. Only rookie that was over a 27% team target share. He was at 29.3. So what he did was truly impressive. And in those last 5 games, he had 12 targets, 11, 9, 8, 8. 4 of those games were with Desmond Ridder. Kyle Pitts was not there, but also we saw Kyle Pitts being ignored last year. It was like Arthur Smith hated him. He was like, he even made the comment, like, we're trying to win games, not fantasy football. But it's like, I feel like Kyle Pitts could help you win games. Like it's all confusing there. If he was going super high, I would be completely off, but he's going around Brandon Ayuk, Christian Kirk, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman Jr. I think he has higher upside than all of those guys, and he might even be a bit safer with that target share, even if the team doesn't pass as much. I do think he's the clear cut top target on this team where there's no other wide receivers that he's competing against, only Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, it just scares me a little bit, the entire Falcons offense that doesn't involve Bijan Robinson in the running game. So I think I'm just a little bit scared. I'm not sure what we're going to get from Desmond Ridder, where I actually have more confidence. I think Sam Howell and this Commanders potential
Yeah, you
pass
do.
game. And that brings us to the question we're going to ask here. Now, I think you might be on the same page. Christian Watson is going at 25, Jahan Dotson at 35. To me, there was a key stat there when Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin were on the field. Dotson was the better fantasy player. And I think his profile is more like a number 1 than McLaurin to me. Like, he can do everything, stretch the field vertically. He's got the speed there, but he's a very good route runner. I think he profiles as a number 1. I do like this Eric Bieniemy offense a little bit more. So I look at the values here. I think Watson a little too rich for me, right? I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to get from Jordan Love. There's a lot of other young receivers that he could spread the ball around to a little bit. Watson was so touchdown dependent on a very low volume last year. Can he duplicate that? That's hard to expect. Where I look at Jahan Dotson, the path to targets is clear, right? He's going to play well off McLaurin. He's going to get favorable coverage. Bieniemy is going to scheme him open well. So I think, to me, Watson getting a little too rich for me. I think Dotson clearly is a better value, and I think has maybe even a better wide receiver 2 back end upside.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it is, right? There's so many question marks on both of these offenses, but at least we know Jahan Dotson is the clear cut either at worst, I think the second target on the team, and he has a chance to be the first target. Watson, there's so many young playmakers there. He could be the first guy, he could be the fourth. Like, we have no idea. And he just disappeared so much last season. 5 of his 14 games with fewer than 5 PPR points seems impossible when he was supposed to be Aaron Rodgers' number 1 guy. And when you said the difference there in ADP, it doesn't seem that big of a gap, but it is when you look at where they're going overall. So Christian Watson right now is going 54th overall among all positions. That's 5th round pick you have to spend on him. Or you can wait on Jahan Dotson. He's going 90th overall. You can grab him in the 8th round. That is a huge gap and a huge difference of talent that you're taking these guys over. And Dotson, I feel like people are just forgetting he dealt with a hamstring injury pretty much for the entire middle part of his rookie season. He came onto the scene immediately, was scoring touchdowns left and right, got injured. It took him a while to come back because that's what happens with hamstring injuries. These last 5 games, 16 points, 21 points, 20 points, 7 points, 10 points. Like, he had 3 receptions of over 20 plus receiving yards in the one game he played with Sam Howell. He is electric. He can have those big plays. And I think, like you said, he also profiles as a wide receiver 1. People are sleeping on this man.
Yeah, and you mentioned how this is important because, again, they were both rookies last year. So they are having the connection maybe that Terry McLaurin had a little bit. And I know Taylor Heineke kind of fed McLaurin quite a bit. So when you look at this connection and the chemistry, also a plus there. So, and I think how just a shot of having the volatility that Love has and maybe having a more productive year. So when all things are considered, everything seems equal. You would look at Jahan Dotson and the talent and purely say, look, there's a reason he was drafted ahead of Watson last year for real, and that's maybe going to come to fruition here with the Commanders. Now, we'll talk about a deep cadre of second-year wide receivers, starting with Treylon Burks there in our next segment. But we have been talking a lot about second-year wide receivers, and that's going to be our eBay guaranteed pick of the week for you. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up here with Locked On Fantasy Football to bring you our eBay Motors guaranteed picks each week. We're going to be here all season long each week before the draft, and whether you're preparing for draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with the players that are guaranteed to fit in a roster. So it's time. With draft prep underway, here's who we have picked out for you on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. We're going to Chris Olave here, looking for a second-year fantasy football wide receiver who can drive your team to big points. Well, the catch goes on here with a new starting quarterback. Then expect a smooth ride when investing in the Saints. Chris Olave. Olave was dangerous as a number one in every capacity as a rookie, and there's no reason to pump the brakes now that he has Derek Carr thrown to him. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and more than 144 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car, because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the very first time. We're going to help you win a fantasy football championship, and eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So go forth, switch gears, crank up the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right price at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, Michelle, it's time to look at our deeper sleepers. So we've pumped up Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jahan Dotson. Now let's see if there's someone we like from this group. These are the guys that are outside the drafted realm, so to speak, in half-point PPR expert consensus right now. We have Treylon Burks with the Titans at 39. Jameson Williams with a suspension. He's at 52. From the Lions, they have Sky Moore of the Chiefs at 54. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson's teammate, at 63. Rashid Shaheed playing with Chris Olave at 66. Alec Pierce of the Colts at 67. John Mechie of the Texans, 73. And Wan'Dale Robinson, don't forget about him, at 78. And we're going all the way to Tyquan Thornton at 82 at wide receiver. So what stands out here for you, Michelle?
Listen, so I'm getting more and more in on George Pickens, and I need you to tell me if I'm just being a homer and this is my bias pick, because I keep seeing all these splash plays at training camp, and Kenny Pickett actually looking deeper down the field and Pickens making those amazing catches that he always does. He was so up and down in his rookie season, right? He had some really nice games, some really splashy catches, and then he would just absolutely disappeared. He scored 15 plus fantasy points in 6 games last year. That's solid enough for a rookie. There are so many weapons on the Steelers, though. Like Deontay Johnson's going to get 140 targets. Pat Freiermuth is going to get targets. Najee Harris. They brought in Allen Robinson. Will Pickens score enough touchdowns to matter? Like Kenny Pickett actually has to throw more than 7 touchdowns. I don't know. I'm so in the middle with Pickens here. I can't decide if I'm in or out. Will you help me?
Yeah, I mean, I did forget to mention him there, and I was going to leave him to him to say he stands out. And it's funny that you just went right to him and just ignored all these other guys. So that kind of tells me something. But Treylon Burks, I'm interested in. I think with Pickens, I think, again, the question is he going to get enough targets in relation to Deontay Johnson? Or are they going to open up the passing game just enough here for him? So a lot of question marks there, but the talent is there, right? He can be a big slot when needed. He can make big plays on the perimeter when needed. So I like the versatility, what he can bring. I just like the player. So sometimes you just go for the talent, and I think Pickens has a lot of talent. So I didn't conveniently omit him here, but I figured he might go there. And with Treylon Burks, I think everyone's just assuming DeAndre Hopkins is going to get all the targets here, but he's old. And keep that in mind. He could break down any time. He had injury issues last year. Treylon Burks, I get it's not exactly the passing volume that you're looking for, but I do like the fact that he profiles similarly to A.J. Brown. That's who they kind of used that draft pick they traded to the Eagles to get him for. So I don't think they're just going to say, Traylon Burks, okay, we got Nuke, we're okay. We got Chigokonkwo, we're okay. They didn't invest a first-round pick in Traylon Burks, and maybe it even gets better if they transition to Will Levis, right, at some point. So I think I like Burks, and just looking at Pickens, I think these are the most talented. I think it's very hard to invest in anyone else here. Williams with the suspension, Sky Moore with Rashee Rice coming on. I will throw out a name here, Rashid Shaheed. Here, we talked about Chris Olave, but Shaheed is a shot guy, right? He makes a lot of big plays. He has a bit of a growing issue, but he should be okay for week 1. We're looking at that next receiver who could step up. Now, Michael Thomas gets hurt. All of a sudden, you have a guy that can make some big plays there with Shaheed. So that's a player that I'm really looking at to maybe as a kind of dart throw of this group.
I mean, yeah, Shaheed had a surprisingly great end of his rookie season. I mean, the final weeks there, 53 yards, 75, 95, 41, 79, and then the last week was just 34. But he was getting work in at the end of his rookie season. Now, I think with Chris Olave and Michael Thomas there, and when Kamara gets back, or maybe Kendra Miller gets some targets in the backfield, it's going to be hard for him to be consistent for fantasy. So he's just a guy I'm keeping an eye on in case there is an injury to one of these pass catchers, but I probably wouldn't consider drafting him in my actual just like 15, 16 round drafts.
Yeah, for sure. And really, this is just a tough group, really. I'm not too interested in any investment here. So make sure this is why we want you to get on one of those top 5 guys, or maybe Pickens or Burke. And maybe that's it, right? You don't want to go anywhere else. I don't think. Don't go crazy. I mean, you want some young players, but there's so much top-heavy talent in the second-year wide receiver group that you have to go in that direction. Now, we will look at the tight ends in our final segment here from the second-year class. A lot of intriguing names there, including a couple that are borderline tight end 1. So we'll do that in our final segment. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Tomorrow on the show, we will turn our attention to the third-year players. So look at that and look at the running backs and quarterbacks in that class, and then do the same here with wide receivers and tight ends as well on Thursday. So a lot of good stuff here coming at you. Welcome to Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in the league. We're part of Locked On Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. Michelle, we're up to our last segment here. We're going to talk tight ends. 2 guys that we've debated a little bit here as we've looked at targets. Greg Dulcich and Chigokonkwo, we'll talk about them first. They're 12 and 13 here in half-point PPR, according to the experts. Going a little bit deeper, you have Trey McBride of the Cardinals with Zach Ertz, a little bit banged up. He's at 24. You have Jelani Woods at 29. Isaiah Likely at 31. And Kate Otten, 33, and then Jake Ferguson at 36. So maybe just a lot of dart throws beyond those 2 guys, Dulcich and Konkwo. But let's bring up what you like about both of those guys here at the top.
Yeah, I think Greg Dulcich is my top guy to break out this year at this position, and he has a fantastic draft cost in the 12th round. So you're not risking much of anything. Last year, he only played 10 games, right? He missed the beginning part of the season with an injury, didn't come in. And for a rookie tight end to miss the beginning part of the season, come in midseason and produce the way he did is truly special. On a per game basis, Dulcich ranked 13th among tight ends in targets, 5th in targeted air yards, and 10th in receiving yards. He's actually one of just 6 tight ends since 2000 to average 40 plus receiving yards per game in his rookie season. The others were Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, Jordan Reed, Aaron Hernandez, and Jeremy Shockey. Like all super athletic, talented tight ends that can get it done for fantasy. And with Tim Patrick's injury and him being out for the year, I think that opens up a ton for the other pass catchers. And I think it might benefit Greg Dulcich the most.
Yeah, I do like his profile, definitely athletically. He's up there with the charts. I mean, you want to do all the spark scores and all these things that people analyze with these players. And he's definitely a plus athlete, right? I mean, the question is how much is Russell Wilson, a guy that typically going back and maybe just the personnel that he had in Seattle didn't target the tight end consistently. The numbers were kind of up and down. Part of it was the offense didn't really feature that position all that much. So now the Broncos, we know Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi, they do think about the tight end quite a bit, whether it's New Orleans or with the Chargers last year. So this is an important position for them, especially if they need a supplemental receiver here. So I do like the idea of Dulcich. I'm not sure about the execution. I think you look at Okonkwo, look, he's got the same profile. Again, the same question marks. Is he going to get enough behind DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks to be as effective as we want? I mean, the flash was there, same thing, right? Small sample size, really looked great. So I'm a little bit worried about both of these guys. There's just too many variables for me. I know there's a potential I'm missing out on a breakout guy if I don't go here. So that's something to look at for sure. But again, I wouldn't mind having these guys, but also looking at another tight end to have a little bit of a comfort level if I need to stream and look at the matchups and go in that direction. So that's how I feel about both of these. I'm also looking at some other tight ends here that might have some value. I'm not interested in too many guys beyond this, but I do look at Trey McBride, right? Zach Ertz is getting up there. He's hurt again. He's a guy that perpetually can't stay on the field. You have Rondell Moore. He's a little bit of a gadget player, maybe a regular receiver they can trust. Marquise Brown, up and down and stretching the field. And we don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be. And then you add DeAndre Hopkins being gone. And we know the tight end was key when Hopkins was gone in a different style of offense they run. So now you look at the presence of Trey McBride. I really like him athletically. Again, another guy that you think can be busy all over the field. I thought overall he was the best tight end in last year's class until some things happened there that dropped him down the draft. So I look at Trey McBride. I think there's some potential there. These other guys, however, Michelle, I think there's just too much of a crowd where I'm going to feel comfortable with drafting any of them.
Yeah, like you can look at Kate Otten, who had some solid fantasy days last year, 4 games, 10 plus fantasy points, including an 18-point game. But that was with Tom Brady, right? It's just way different now where Baker Mayfield can't even win the job over Kyle Trask, what it looks like right now. Like, I don't really want to deal with a tight end there competing with targets from Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And then Jelani Woods, he had some really great games as well, and he's huge, but it feels like there's 1 gazillion tight ends in the Colts offense right now. So I don't know which one is going to be the primary tight end there. He could be really good though, because you have Anthony Richardson, who's a little bit inaccurate, who's a mobile quarterback. And it seems like those type of quarterbacks really like to throw to their big tight ends over the middle where there's a lot of space. So it won't surprise me if Jelani Woods breaks out. I don't want to waste a draft pick on him, but definitely like if he comes out week 1 and performs, I'm going to pick him up because that shows me, okay, Anthony Richardson does, want to target him. Like I won't think it's fake. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. And look, I just wish the Colts would stop doing this, right? They just keep having tight ends, this Kylan Granson and Mo Alley Cox. Just stop collecting tight ends. Just like stick with one. You're drafting one almost every year, sometimes 2. Just stick with one. And that's a big frustration, right? In fantasy, like we always have to have Dulcich, but we have to have Albert O. We have to have Josh Wiley being drafted there with Okonkwo. There's always someone else cutting into that production. That's why, again, maybe Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, this is why maybe you want to go there as much as you can to avoid this mess. But yeah, definitely, I think we can safely say, I think, Michelle, that you definitely want to have second-year wide receivers on your team. If you don't have a second-year tight end on your team, I think you're okay.
Besides Greg Dulcich, yes.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Yeah, I mean, maybe he's a hybrid wide receiver at this point. So we'll say he's an honorary wide receiver among the second-year class based on his athleticism. So target second-year wide receivers and Greg Dulcich. That's the takeaway here from today's show. So, Michelle, again, any closing thoughts on these guys before we get into the third-year people tomorrow?
No, I'm excited to talk about the third-year breakouts. There's some guys that we've just been waiting on, and we think it's finally going to happen next season. So that would be a fun episode tomorrow.
Yeah, so check us out for Locked On Fantasy Football. This has been Vinnie Iyer, and check us out, subscribe, and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
And I'm Michelle Madgziuk. Bye, y'all.